Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our session on the celebration of the 10th year of the Smart Grids and Electric Vehicles Laboratory. Today, we will have, I would say, a conversation with some of the more influent people, or some of them were actually very influenced on the creation of this laboratory. So with me, I have Professor João Peças Lopes, Professor Nicolas Atzaguírio, João Torres from INESC Distribuição, and Nuno Silva from FASEC, that somehow, as you will see during the discussion, were related to the story of this infrastructure. I will present a short bio from each one of them, as if by any strange reason you do not know all of them, because they are actually well known in this area. So, to start with, Professor João Peças Lopes, she's a full professor at Faculty of Engineering of University of Porto. He's Associate Director of INESC TEC and also the coordinator of the Tech for Energy initiative at INESC TEC. He's an IEEE Fellow. He's chair in the REN Award Committee, Vice President of the Board of the Portuguese Association of Electric Vehicles, and also the chair of the International Steering Committee of IEEE PowerTech. Moving on to João Torres. So João Torres is the CEO of EDP Distribuição, the Portuguese DSO, and he's also the vice chair of EDSO for Smart Grids, after the chairman for that organization for quite some time. And also he joined EDP in 1982 before becoming CEO in 2006. He held management and executive positions in the energy generation and distribution, human resources, healthcare services and training, including the creation of EDP's shared service company. Professor Nicolas Atzaguírio is a professor in power systems in the National Technical University of Athens. He was also chair and now is vice chair of the EU Technology and Innovation Platform on Smart Networks for Energy Transition. He was also CEO of EDNO and also executive vice chair of the Public Power Corporation, TSO in Greece. He's an honorary member of SGEVL. He is also editor-in-chief of the IEEE Transactions on Power Systems. All of them well experienced in this area, and so we will have a rich discussion for sure on these topics. I would like to say that this session is always open to your questions, so feel free in the questions and answers to put your questions, and in the end, we will try to answer them and share the vision of our specialists in this domain. Perhaps to understand a little bit more the structure of this discussion today, we will start on the first part of the session will be to the pathway that we took in the smart grids and electric mobility area that led to the creation of this laboratory. We were discussing that today, so it's 10 years now, time flies, but we have to go back almost to 2002, and my first question will be exactly to Nicolas Atzaguírio. So if we go back to 2002, when we started together with Professor Peças Lopes designing the concepts of microgrids and put in place the first microgrids project. Can you tell us a little bit more on how you started discussing this idea?
Okay, so let me thank you for this invitation. It's a great pleasure to be among friends. And let me say that your question brings me back to 2001. In 2001, there was a very successful conference organized in Porto called Porto PowerTech that was organized next to River Douro. And we had a nice boat trip together with João Peças Lopes and Nick Jenkins. And it was the first time we discussed the possibility of developing microgrids. Together with Joao, had a good experience from Greek islands, where we had the design control centers that were especially suited for islands with high penetration of renewables. So these were systems that faced considerable challenges, not only in forecasting wind and solar, etc., but also from the sense of dynamic security, because you know islands have no interconnections, so they have particular frequency problems. So together with Joao and Nick Jenkins, we decided to transfer this experience to mainland parts of the distribution system. At that time, the concept of microgrids was starting to be discussed in US, and we thought that we could do the European microgrids. So we decided to bid for a European proposal, and the microgrids project came. The microgrids project aimed to test various technologies, to check how microgrids would operate, and especially to test control techniques in laboratories. At that time, there were laboratories in mainly in Germany. INESC also had laboratories in France and so at NTUA. So that was the project that started in 2002. And it was, in this project, there were 14 partners involved from 7 European countries. And from Portugal, INESC was in a very prominent role, and also EDP was part of it. And we had other, PPC was involved also from my country, and NTUA was the coordinator. That was a fun project. Good.
Thank you, Nikos. This now to Professor Pestalozzi. So we can see the role that INESC TEC, at the time INESC Porto, had in this project, with the big involvement of all the team led by you. I remember because it was exactly the year where I entered INESC Porto, so 20 years now almost, and we felt that we were exploring some new things. How did this microgrids concept transform the power systems unit we had back then? What was exactly our role in this project?
Okay, so, well, first of all, let me say that I'm very happy to be here and to be among friends, as Nikos said, and to discuss and to remember what we have done more than 10 years ago. And indeed, at that time, 2001, 2002, we were thinking in developing the concepts of the microgrid. And this was indeed the very beginning of what we were trying to develop in terms of creating and transposing what we were doing, what we have been doing at the level of the island, as Nikos was just describing, but we were transposing those ideas to a smaller system that could be also a system operated in a distribution grid, and assuming that this distribution grid could, in some situations, be operated in islanded mode. And I remember that since the very beginning, our job was to study the operation of those microgrids, of those small islanded grids that could operate it in an islanded manner, in a way that we were looking at the dynamic behavior of those grids. And so assuming that they could operate in islanded mode if something went wrong from the side of the main grid. And at that time, I also remember that we were doing a completely new path on these domains, because we were also addressing issues like black start. So black start was also taken into consideration when we were trying to be sure that it was possible to provide to those microgrids, to those small networks, the capability to operate in a islanded manner, but also to be capable to be resilient to facing disturbances that could take place from the grid side. And even in situations like blackouts, if a blackout could take place, then we would like that small part of the network should be capable to operate and to show some robustness of operation, feeding local loads. And so this was our main job on the microgrids project. And we, as you were saying, we thought that we were doing completely new things, and we were, in fact. This was fantastic at that time. We were enthusiastic when doing all that research.
Yes, and it's interesting to see that 20 years ago, as many of you that are familiar with these concepts, resiliency and black start and distributed generation and distributed resources were already being discussed with very sophisticated tools that allow us to have all this way in a set of projects, which brings me back to Nikos. A few years later, more microgrids. You take this philosophy of control to another level. And I believe that, and this is something that our experience, the fundamentals of the first automated meter reading and infrastructures that we had all over Europe were clearly inspired in some of these concepts with this distributed hierarchical structure that would now go to a different level. Can you explain, Nikos, very briefly, what was the evolution of the concept that you had in microgrids and then moved on to more microgrids?
Yes, sure. In fact, this microgrid project was successful, and it was the first project that immediately, even before finishing the project, we started a follow-up proposal called More Microgrids. In fact, that was also encouraged by the European Commission at the time. I don't know if you remember, Joao, that at that time, I think Manuel said that this is a proposal that fits in the call like a shoe in the feet. So it was really timely. And the second phase, the follow-up project, was it was a consortium comprising 22 partners from 11 countries. And of course, Portugal was very much in the protagonistic role. Joao and EDP were there. It was a consortium comprising 22 partners from 11 countries. And of course, Portugal was very much in the protagonistic role. Joao and EDP were there. And also we had with us partners from Germany, ABB and Siemens, from Italy, Cesi, of course, from Great Britain, we had University of Manchester again, and from Netherlands, we had the Utility of Netherlands, from Denmark, at ETRA, from France, etc. And the basic component of this project was we wanted to try now to test what we have developed in theory to apply it in practice. So we managed to set up 7 pilot cases, 7 microgrids. Some of them were microgrids that were really big labs that wanted to island and to test various cases. But there were also 4 or 5 real microgrids. One of them was in Mannheim. Another one was in...
Somehow we have an issue here with the sound because we keep hearing you repeatedly, but a few seconds before. Do you hear me okay? Is it fine now?
I can hear you well. Before I did hear myself for the second time.
Now let's hope it works.
Is okay?
Yeah.
So shall I go back or you heard what I said?
We heard. We were hearing 2 versions, but
twice.
It was clear. It was clear.
So there were these 7 pilot cases, and in Portugal, EDP had also established a small microgrid that was a Ilhavo municipal swimming pool, where you had installed a microturbine of 60 kVA, and you managed to island this small facility. So you tested again how microgrids could switch from interconnected to islanded mode with a rather big load, like a swimming pool. And then a very interesting case in this period was the Kythnos microgrid that I believe it was really something very important, very interesting. It is one of the milestones in the microgrid's history. At that time, there was a settlement of 12 houses that could operate with 100% renewables at that time. That was quite unique. Of course, it was a small installation, but we managed there to play with several technologies. It was the first time that we applied multi-agent distributed control to reduce the load. And we learned a lot from these things. It is the time where we started the UAE also developing our laboratory. And I think we learned a lot. INESC had done an excellent job there, not only control techniques, but also they developed how the system can restart from blackout, can be used for startup, for black start. And also they developed that concept of multi-microgrids. So that's even more in the future. Imagine now the distribution system having several microgrids and how they can coordinate and operate at a low level. I mean, and then after that, after some time, we got involved in the MERGE project, which is another project that deals with electromobility. And I think that was one of the first projects in Europe that dealt with electromobility. And again, together with INESC and especially with a strong contribution of Joao, we managed to develop a project that was from 2009 to 2012, that we again developed quite original techniques for smart charging. We started discussing regulatory issues, developed roadmaps for a number of countries, including Greece and also Ireland. Ireland was also in that project. Yeah. That was all a very exciting road among, you know, that really all these projects were starting something that is now quite a lot discussed. And at that time, it was really very futuristic. Nobody believed that this would come today as popular as it is. The issue of resilience was not still there. So we did not discuss so much for resilience. And now you see even utilities were quite not really friendly to this idea. I'm not speaking about EDP. I'm speaking about, for instance, EDF was completely against developing microgrids. And now all this has changed so much that you see even utilities, especially in US, not so much in Europe because they are not allowed to run distributed generation, but you see how much now microgrids have become really in the forefront. And electromobility, of course, is now so popular and so much developing, so important for the distribution system.
Yes, thank you, Nikos. You mentioned this MERGE project, which I really think it is also a game changer. And if talking about microgrids in 2002 and 2005 and after in more microgrids was in fact disruptive, talking about electric mobility at the time was even more. I remember the simple fact that we thought of having electric vehicles was something completely different. And we made some of the, let's say, first steps in this area. And I would like to go back to Professor João Peças Lopes. This project MERGE that Nikos referred, together with RAVE project that starts being designed more or less at the same time, they were, let's say, the basics, I would say, of the construction of this concept of the laboratory. What did back then motivate you to start investing in this subject, in electric mobility?
Well, at that time, many people were talking about electric cars, electric mobility, and we immediately, it was so clear for us that we could have a big opportunity in bringing this subject and in introducing this subject in all what we were doing at that time. And I remember that we were capable to design a proposal where almost everything that was possible to be done was in there. And I'm sure Nikos agrees with me. Because we were doing, I mean, so issues related with so regulatory control, planning of the grids with the presence of electric mobility. So the charge, the load of the electric cars, what was this going to provoke in the planning of the networks, not only the distribution network, but also the transmission grid and even the portfolio of the generation. And I remember at that time that we made a survey, and this survey, I still use it because the information we could obtain from that survey is still very, very important because it provided us the idea how the drivers could behave and how this would influence the load in the system. And so we did almost everything. We did stability, black start, the integration of electric cars in microgrids, in the transmission network, all the dynamics, the dynamic operation of the grid. I remember that we studied how electric vehicles could impact the frequency, the behavior of the frequency of the system when facing disturbances. And nowadays I see many projects addressing this topic, and 10 years ago we already were doing that. We were already conceiving models to deal with that. Of course, that we were dealing with all this from the simulation side, from the conceptual side. So we were developing models, we were simulating, we were addressing what could be the impacts. And then at a certain moment, we immediately realized that the next step needed to be to go to the practical field, to go to the laboratory. And so this is the next chapter of the story. But indeed, electric mobility was extremely important for all the path, for all the success of our story, success story, as a matter of fact, of what we have done. So when I go back and I remember those times, I realized that we were indeed very ambitious. Okay, I believe that Nikos also agrees.
Yes. Even if with the construction of this building having this purpose, and
yes, but if I may, yeah. If I may, okay, because building the laboratory was even more ambitious. I'm daring to use a Greek word. This was a kind of an epiphania. It was clearly an epiphania because it was so difficult, and this idea came out. And finally, we arrived at what we have here. So we were successful in doing that, and this was really fantastic.
Yes, and now I think we have kind of a surprise for you, and you have some pictures that will take us back to that moment where we can see where it all began. I remember that we started still at Faculty of Engineering. So before having this building, these are some pictures that we took from the laboratory in Faculty of Engineering. And then in 2011, we started. This was an impressive moment where we put inside this building, this switch cabinet that is behind us, that had to come all in one piece. So this was really challenging. The first sessions where we could start to understand the prototypes and the technology. And now a little bit of how we can see it today, although it kept improving and we have new technologies all the time. I would now move on to the second part of this session, where we will discuss some of the main achievements and benefits that this infrastructure leverage from the scientific point of view, but also industrial and end user. And I must start by apologizing to my dear friend Nuno Silva that I forgot his presentation in the beginning. Perhaps it's because we know each other for so much time that I actually thought everyone was aware of his presence and didn't need this presentation. But Nuno Silva, so he's currently Chief Technical Officer of INESC and also member of the Executive Board. Nuno, as he says in this short bio, is a vivid promoter of a more sustainable world through a rapid and swift energy transition. He was part of this travel with us, not exactly in this position, like myself. So we had a lot of hours working on some of these things, and he will now join this part of the conversation. Sorry, my friend, for not presenting you in the beginning. But now we will talk about this decade where we started this infrastructure, and I must go back to Professor Prestes Lopes, because when it was done, when we had all the equipment inside, we finally had this capacity to demonstrate some of these ideas and solutions that you had discussed in microgrids and non-microgrids and merge project. However, this represented a significant challenge because, as you said, our team was pretty used to modeling and simulation, and suddenly we had to be able to demonstrate. How did you manage to start feeding this infrastructure with projects, but also with thesis? We had prototypes. How did INESC TEC benefit from this infrastructure?
Okay, thank you very much for this question. Well, first of all, I have to say that this laboratory was a dream, and a dream that took a long time to come out, and many people contributed for the laboratory, because before having what we have here, it was necessary to make specifications of all the details related with the laboratory itself, as well as the equipment that we have inside. And I remember that, so we started doing that also by finding financing for the laboratory. And so that financing came with the RAVE project. And so I was fortunate at that time that I had a team with very committed people, where you were one of the most committed ones, Luis, together with Filipe Joel and Carlos Moreira. And I remember so well that we were capable to specify in a very detailed manner everything what we have here at the moment. And most of the things that we see here, they are supported by a lot of backstage work, and also some other equipment that are not inside this building, that are outside, like the batteries, the house of the batteries and the cables that connect the house of the batteries to this laboratory. And so this was really challenging at that time to define the plan for the build-up of this laboratory. And we were fortunate to find out financing from several sources. And of course, that in those sources, we have our partners, our industrial partners. So INESC, EDP Distribution, REN. And so we were really fortunate to get a lot of financing. And every year we were working here, we were capable to design a new proposal, a new project, and a new way to continue financing the laboratory. And it was at that time extremely important, and you already mentioned that, because we were a research group that was used to model and to simulate the operation of the electric power system, transmission and distribution networks. We were capable of doing anything, but it was necessary to give a step ahead, and this step ahead was to be capable to start building hardware, and the hardware related with all the subjects that we were addressing, that we have been studying in the first stages of our research, with microgrids, with more microgrids, with merge. And so the laboratory was, in fact, a tool to start developing a lot of research, applied research, finally, to what was really also a bridge to the industry. And this was extremely important. And we were really very lucky to have a set of industrial partners like FASEC, like EDP Distribution, that believed in what we were doing and put it also their will and their money for this to become a reality. And so I also have to thank all these people and so all these companies for the support they gave us during all these years. And okay, then it was possible to start PhD thesis, master thesis, bringing students from the faculty and to bring them to the laboratory, to involve them in projects. And this was extremely important because then new doors were opened and new ideas were popping up each time we were doing new things. And then so many other projects came up. EU-funded projects, national projects, collaboration with the industry. So this is a tremendous tool to leverage all what we have been doing in the last years. And I'm so happy because this was not, this was in fact a work of a team, of a very large team. And I'm very happy about that.
We can tell, we are also, and they were there. So Nuno was there, João was there, EDP, FASEC, strongly committed. Some of the equipment that we see here, they have FASEC logo. They helped us design them. None of us have ever done something like this. It was a challenge, but it was also not only in the project, but also in the design and the conception of all of this, you were also fundamental. And now I will explore a little bit this participation. Perhaps I will start with João Torres. One interesting thing, when we look at those projects that Nikos was referring back in 2002 and 2005, EDP distribution was already there. So it was clear that these were interesting topics. As Nikos said, some of the DSOs were actually quite reluctant in many of these areas, but it wasn't the case of EDP that was always involved in these projects. I must refer the RAVE project because, as Professor Pessalopes mentioned, not only you were part of the project as you invested in this capacity here, which was something fundamental for us. And then of course comes InnovGrid, where we were all together and we started probably what was the stepstone of this smart grid concept in the company. How important was this association with us back then to the development of EDP strategy on the smart grids topic?
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for this invitation. We are really between friends, and I know that there are so many friends following us, I'm sure. It's a special day for all of us. At EDP Distribution, our first project to develop a more intelligent grid go back to the 90s when we spoke about smart metering. And at that time, it was the automation of our substations was the main target of our work. But quickly we realized that to evolve for new control network strategies, we need to move to lower voltage in a way that we can make the secondary substation an important control element in the intelligent grid. Even now, I believe in it. It's not just smart meters, much more than that. At that time, INESC was already a leader institution in thinking the new distributed energy world, namely exploring the concept related to microgrids, like was referred by Nikos and João, and the early steps of electric mobility. So there's some points in the agenda, in the top of the agenda today, that at that time they are already looking for it. And then came in off-grid. It was a really fantastic project. He's still alive. Even this weekend, hundreds of thousands of Portuguese customers receive an SMS or an email saying that they are welcome to the intelligent grid, to the smart grid, because now our we call ME, but this the first name was Energy Box, and that they are now connected. So it's a long journey, but it is a stepstone and is still our main brand name on this ongoing transition, and still actual. And I remember well those times, and Nikos referred that just a few countries in Europe were advancing with the rollout of smart meters. Then we are engaged in this process, working especially with Spain, looking for solutions, especially on communication between smart meter and the secondary substation. But then it became clear that it was far more bigger than the metering solutions themselves. And we need an integrated view that was built within off-grid. Even in Évora, our main site, we need to adjust our way to do it, especially in the second step where we engage the customer in the process. They are also key for the success. But this integrated view was really important, and it came from INESC. They are developing at the time very interesting knowledge with projects like was referred microgrids and more microgrids, where storage was also already part of the equation. So now everyone is speaking about storage, but we can't. It was at the time. At the time, it was already part of the equation. And I remember a conference in Évora, International Microgrids Conference, that I was invited by João to be there, to be speaker. And I came we are in the beginning of our journey. And I was really surprised with the quality and so many nationalities and work done by all those teams from different countries about microgrids, and smart grids at the time. So I remember that conference. And even now I must thank you to choose Évora for that conference. It was really a great day for all of us at the team. And in off-grid in the beginning, and even now, but was important to boost the project, an unprecedented collaborative effort involving academia, industrial partners based in Portugal. And it includes especially EFASEC. And we work with this small team. We create a company, And we are, of course, there's some limitation from the statutes of INESC to be on the board, but all the team was there. But we create a company that we call InnovGrid to make that first movement on field in Évora. And to create the company is not just one more company. It's an idea, a common idea, and it was inspired by INESC and do the field work with different companies, including FASEC and some others that we can remember in the next minutes. And it was not only in Portugal. InnovGrid quickly became a case study in Europe, because in fact, we are really advanced at the time. And the secret was the academy and the team, João, Nikos, and some others, that they are helping us, the industry, to have a vision what we can do. It was important. And I remember the first document where the traditional meter was called Energy Box, was an INESC document. I remember that very well. What a nice name. And then we adopted. Now it was called EMI, Equipment for Intelligent Metering. So it's a more formal name. But I remember when I read that document, it was a document with 2 pages. But I didn't forget. I don't forget that document. So until now, we have succeeded in our fruitful cooperation. We have been working in a very large number of initiatives. This lab became really important. I followed the dream of the using a general word, the professors to build the lab. I followed the dream, and I remember when we received the ETSO board meeting in Oporto for a large meeting with a lot of friends. We, of course, included in our program a visit to the lab, INESC TEC lab, where you are seated. And I can assure you that I was so proud as you when we showed to our colleagues for all around Europe the work that we are doing there together. Of course, Nikos has an advantage because he knows it very well at the time, but all the others from ETSO board meeting are just really surprised what work we can do. So for us, the cooperation with INESC was really important and is still really important. And that's why I'm really glad to be here. I'm really glad to be here and look for the last topic of the agenda, the vehicle to grid, because it's something really new and you are there speaking about something really new. So this is my first appointment. Thank you.
So again, we will be discussing the future in a few minutes. I must say that when you referred, it was of high impact when ESO came here to Porto. I remember that in that conference you referred in Évora, all the members of the conference were also deeply impressed with the pilot that EDP had in Évora, because they weren't expecting that so many concepts that they were just, well, discussing, many of them on paper, were already in the field. And that was also very important for us, because for us, it increased the credibility of our scientific work when we managed to convince a DSO to put many of these ideas in the field. So it was also very important to us. Moving on to Nuno and the relationship with FASEC, that is also special. We have to go back to the 90s when we have these first projects with significant cooperation between the two institutions. Back then we were in INESC Porto, even before the existence of this laboratory. We have many years of technology transfer and know-how between the two institutions. If I remember, we had a project that was also tackling some of these issues that Professor Pestalozzi was responsible, that was microgrids plus EV, which was also quite strange because, or unusual, because we had an FCT project with a manufacturer that was also disrupted. Already on these issues, microgrids and electric vehicles, so in 2008. Then we have a series of projects related with this smart grids. InnoGrid already referred, SCADA BT, FI Charge, ADMS, INESC TEC, FlexSG, Anyplace. So all of them taking benefit from this infrastructure where we are sitting today. Nuno, looking back at these projects and to all of this story, how did FASEC benefit from the existence of this capacity to test under real conditions some of these concepts, some of these prototypes and solutions that you would later include in your portfolio?
Well, Luis, thank you very much for inviting me, and first and foremost, happy birthday. It's a birthday party after all, so it's a 10th anniversary. So I'm very, very honored to be invited to be with you, because I feel a little bit of the lab as my own. So do apologize me if I say our lab every now and then, and if it skipped my mind. Back in the days when we put all that together, we didn't have red sofas like the ones you are sitting there. I remember the conditions a little bit different back then, especially at night, because it was kind of cold. Well, let's say it's a place where you wouldn't sleep. So it's with a high nostalgia that I remember those days. And reflecting back from the past and judging from or taking the context of your question, Luis, there's a long story, and there's actually a nice story to be told behind that, because there's a consequence to a strategy that both INESC TEC and FASEC put together few years back that resulted then in the lab. And for me, the best way that I have to describe the lab is a tangible way to materialize science. Professor Pestalozzi already said applied science. Well, I think it's more than applying it. It's making it tangible. It's materializing it, because you can see, you can touch. And that's exactly what it was. It was way ahead of time. We had I remember the requirements you issued and that we designed together. It was absolutely nonsense. No one in the industry would say, well, here's a nice use case. Yeah, obviously. I think we are still reflecting some functionalities that didn't come to market yet. And I think you're going to touch that on the next topic. But 10 years ago, I think we were able to set up and design an infrastructure that is of use of academia, but also of industry. And it's really ready to be evolved. So if there's something that can be characterized in this infrastructure, is the flexibility that you designed. Not only the grid that I remember vividly, how many connectors you have, another quite ambitious design. The number of combination of configurations that you could have, so that we could actually connect different equipments in different feeders and create innumerous scenarios, and that was really special. And I always think of it as being very consequent with the strategy, because a few years back, as you said, there were a few projects that we enrolled, and actually parts of these projects are set up in some of these equipment that you have behind you. And we were able to evolve these equipments, creating new functionalities, adding new configurations, making these products more remotely controlled than we ever expected for the use of the lab. Then we as an industry looking at this equipment, then trying to create an ambition behind it to make it marketable. And I remember you have their platforms of software, you have their aggregators of information, you have smart meters, you have bay control units of substations inside your lab. You have the infamous DTC that it was a key element of the Novgrid architecture. And you even have an EV charger at the beginning. I think 10 years seems not to be too long in the past, but actually I remember riding a car with you that is a model that ceased to exist long time ago from Renault. So I think the time passed and we learn quite a lot, and we learn in a very structured way. Again, let me go back to the strategy. This lab is an aggregation of different co-developments that we INESC, FASEC, also with ADP, and in fact in some of them also with NTUA, that we managed to develop. And at some point in time, these had an epiphany, and all these developments came together and were spiced up with a futuristic foresight. So I think this lab is our lab, and I always feel welcome in that house. Not only me as a person, but me as an industry, because I feel you not only with the infrastructure, but you set up the correct framework to invite industry to come next to you and test and be part of a contextualized scenario that resembles very much a reality, be present or future reality. So again, I need to congratulate you for the vision you had back then, and for the partners you chose that are very glad to be part of the story.
Thank you. No. Yes, it's a fact that nothing could be done without you, and you mentioned some of the automation and those crazy specifications. It made it possible, for instance, and we say that all the time when we receive people and guests here in our lab, we are able to test in 2 minutes, 1 day time. And this is something that with automation, with scripts and so on, at the time was really, I would say crazy, because we were in fact a little bit crazy. But we did well, and I really appreciate your words. And this laboratory is, of course, also from FASEC and from EDP, as it always was. Going back to João, you mentioned the relevance of this infrastructure and of this relationship with INESC TEC in the overall strategy of EDP. You were one of the co-founders of this laboratory, as we said, and I made this exercise of going back to 2010 and look at the number of EU projects, and I must say competitive projects, and we are in Portugal, so we're not Germans and all that influence that others have in Central Europe. And we had 15 EU projects together. I believe that in your image, many of them are on the right. I've seen you had the opportunity to use them as background, so good idea. The fact is that EDP became the Portuguese company with higher EU net contribution in Horizon 2020. And I must say, Horizon 2020, we must look back to 2015. So in these 5 years, EDP had a net contribution of almost 10 million euros, which is quite unusual for a company, because usually this competitive funding is more for universities and research, and it's really interesting to see the role that EDP had. This pipeline of projects that you have, besides your sustainable, stability, evolve, ESO, upgrade, sensible, integrate, and now interconnect. They also support EDP distribution recognition all over Europe as a leading DSO. And you in particular were leading DSO for smart grids. How do you think this relationship and these projects had this impact on this recognition? You're muted, Ron. Sorry.
Okay. I'm saying that it was a long and successful story of partnership in all these projects. Since the beginning, we decided that we must move for European projects. And it was, now I have no doubt it was a correct movement, because we get a lot of cooperation. We, not just in Portugal, but with different companies. I get some figures from my team. We work with 45 nationalities during this period. Inside the company, we engage more than 400 members of our company for that. And we have hundreds of partners on these projects all around Europe, of course, with a major role for INESC, as you referred. And we see it as a main point of our agenda, because we can cooperate, we can look for the best technology, we can test, we can learn, and we can develop our people, our teams, our engineers. And I know it's the same for, it was referred by João Peças Lopes, that some of the PhD and the masters were connected to these projects. We can, and it's really important for a country like Portugal. We are not a small country, we are an average country in Europe, but we need to have a vision and a profile in the way that anyone that wants to launch a project, remember that I must call to the Portuguese. That was our way to manage it. So it was a virtuous cycle, because we challenge each other and we align priorities, and in a way the sector needs to move faster. We are speaking about technology in a way to in some way, for instance, we have now working very deeply to guarantee self-consumption in Portugal. I remember I was in a project in Batalha with FASEC team and INESC, maybe six years ago, with the same issue. It was a test there. So we can test, and we're challenging each other, as I said. And during this period, and you refer it, we have ETSO as a very active player on the European stage. In fact, ETSO also reached its 10th anniversary this very year. We just celebrated a few weeks ago. And Nikos was there since the first day, like me. We are in some way, when you look today to the room, we are the pioneers compared with some, but it's good because new people, new leaders come to the sector, and ETSO is doing his job in a way to reaffirm their position in this new energy world. And for that, work together with different players was very important. Going back to the projects themselves, we have a story to follow it. That's why I used this information in my background slide. In fact, back to 2012, we are both partners at Stabilid Consortium. Starting the work on deployment of stationary batteries, looking to improve the penetration of renewable energy sources. So 2012. Evolve DSO starting 2013 is a landmark for the history to design the evolving roles of the DSO and work together with different DSOs around Europe. Sustainable was a great project. We are a leader for the first time in a big project. It was very relevant to develop the topic of the integration of distributed resources in distribution networks. And INESC TEC was there, FASEC was there, and the Greek institutions were partners in this project. So in 2015, and I remember very well this project, the site was in Lisbon, Parque das Nações, upgrade project. We had the opportunity to address both topics of distribution grid and retail markets. In some way, it was the first project where we have some connection out of the engineering. We need to manage with the consumers and the way they use the energy for. It was very important for us to underline our role as neutral market facilitators. And just a few days ago, of course, there's 15 projects as you refer. We are engaged in more than 33, so almost 30. But just a few days ago, we closed the Integrate project, and where we had also opportunity to work very closely with INESC TEC. It was a very important project. We are now in the phase to disseminate the conclusions. It was the first integrated approach for the future use of flexibility. It's a keyword. When we move for the third point, I will return to flexibility concept. And of course, we work very close even today with two other projects that are moving. Interconnect, where we have the main role is a major project in Europe, and E-Universal. That's I used to put these two projects in the top of my slide. So summarize, I would say that those partnerships were key for not just for development of the Portuguese energy sector, but also for the DSOs in Europe, and the confirmation that we have capability to become an international reference as academy, as industry. But of course, just to finish, as you refer that we are leaders in contribution for Horizon 2020, and we are really proud about that. It is not easy to win the bids, as you know, but we know that everyone knows that INESC TEC also leads from the research and academia side. So it's a double team, very strong for the next future. Thank you.
Thank you, João. In fact, yes, we have been working together in a lot of these projects, and I must also say that EDP's trust and confidence that we are able to deliver is also something that encourages us every day to take these projects moving forward. I had two questions around this topic, but I will probably keep them to the end. And we will now move to the topic related with electric mobility, because we have 10 to 15 minutes behind schedule, and I would like to keep this in time, and I will go back if I have the time. I think now for this transition, and because all of you, we are discussing this infrastructure, but there's a lot of people that doesn't know actually what we have here, and we have a very short video that highlights some of the capacities and the work that we do here that I would invite you to watch now. I hope you enjoyed it. It's very brief, but it gives an idea of some of the things that we do here, and also shows one very important thing, that is people, that we will discuss in the end, but it is also very important for us to state that this would be nothing without the people, as Professor Pessolopes has already mentioned. Now I would focus on the topic that brought many of you here, that is around electric mobility, particularly the challenges and opportunities for the next decades. I would have a very brief introduction. So on 11 December 2019, the European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen presented the new European growth strategy, the European Green Deal, a plan to make Europe the first climate neutral continent by 2050 and to achieve a 50% emission reduction by 2030. Transport is responsible for nearly 1/4 of the European greenhouse gas emissions today, with road transport being accountable for approximately 72% of these emissions. And I will start by asking Nikos, when we look at these objectives and we have the scenario today, we know that pandemic had an impact on these emissions, but the fact is that we seem to be far away from reaching these objectives, and they seem quite ambitious. So there's a lot of work to be done. I know that you and ETIPESNet is working on this strategic research and innovation agenda towards zero emission road transport. Can you give us an highlight of the vision and the roadmap from your point of view for us to achieve these ambitious goals?
Yes, as you said, electromobility is really one of the key areas where Europe wants to take leadership. And ETIPESNet has developed its vision for 2050, where you see all the sectors coupling together with electromobility. Also, they have developed roadmaps and implementation plans of how research should be funded for the next years. But perhaps the most relevant activity where ETIPESNet is involved is the European Green Vehicles Initiative. This is a contractual public-private partnership that has followed another initiative of Europe called Green Vehicles. And the idea now is to develop this partnership in order to create, to design what research and innovation is needed for moving to a 100% carbon-free renewable energy, carbon-free electromobility. So from the Green Cars Initiative, that was from 2008-2013, there was the Green Vehicles Initiative from 2014 to 2020. This initiative is various ETIPs are involved, not only ETIPESNet, but also other ETIPs that have to do with vehicles. And the current activity is called 2.0 partnership, that is from 2021-2027, where there is a system approach for the zero emission from networks. And the idea is to support the carbon neutral European Union by 2050 with strategies and roadmaps for 100% renewable energy transport. And supports all types of vehicles, not only battery vehicles, but also fuel cell vehicles for larger trucks, for larger vehicles. And it looks at the sector integration and interoperability. So it looks also at infrastructures, etc. So the main activities of the 2.0 partnership is to focus on the required research and innovation for the development of next generation energy efficient and affordable near zero emission road vehicles, both battery vehicles and fuel cell for heavy duty vehicles, to provide innovative mobility solutions for people and goods, to provide cost-effective and user-friendly recharging infrastructures, all types, from slow to fast and ultra fast. And in this way, it focuses on a number of work packages now. These are 100% renewable energy for transport, emission-free urban areas, negligible emissions. And in fact, if you try to see how all these activities fit with the European Green Deal, you see that at least 4 of these aims, namely drastic reduction of greenhouse gas emissions by 2050, reduction of pollutant emissions, deployment of charging infrastructure across Europe, and digitalization of transport, all these fit very well to the various Green Deal objectives. So this is what is happening now in Europe, and soon there will be announced this 2.0 partnership call, and there will be funding for this electromobility activities, next, of course, to the other calls of Horizon, etc.
Thank you, Nikos. This is actually a hot topic. I was checking 3 days ago, the European Commission published the EU Sustainable and Smart Mobility Package. One of the key pillars of this strategy is to boost the uptake of zero-emission vehicles. However, out of the 243 million passenger cars on EU roads last year, we had less than 615,000 that was zero-emission. That's roughly 0.25% of the whole car fleet. So this means that the significant demand on local electricity networks is expected now that we are going to foster the growth and we see the incentives. And actually 2020, in a year, I took this data from ASEA, we can see that the internal combustion engine are actually reducing the sales, but electric vehicles have been growing a lot. And so this is a challenge. This is a challenge, and it is a challenge for the network, which takes me to the next question to João Torres. So we have seen in many of these projects that you have on the side of you and others, that people tend to plug in their vehicles when they arrive at work in the morning or when they return home in the evening, being clearly overnight home charging the highest share of these events. And this was something that was measured in a lot of projects, so this is statistics of people behavior. The problem of this high demand factor associated with people's daily routines, because it's something that we also see that people's routines are not that different. If nothing is done, a significant impact on local electricity networks can occur. How is EDP preparing this increase on demand eventually at peak hours?
Thank you, Luis. That's main point. I think there is an easy answer. EDP is working with INESC port. But trying to go in a serious way, of course it's a serious way, but a different way, in a way to correspond to your question. In fact, I would link my answer to the document you referred, the Sustainable and Smart Mobility European Strategy, and where by 2030 there will be at least 30 million zero emissions cars, and at the same time by 2030 there will be at least 100 climate neutral cities in Europe. So just two points. And of course there is the information that we got from the document, the vision that ETIP shared a few months ago about the imaging, the targets in 2050. It's so using the words of the European Commission, we need to build something that is sustainable, smart, and resilient for future generations. So it's a huge challenge we have in front of it. So substantial progress is needed in our grid. on data availability, on exchange of data, on charging infrastructure in a different way. And we need to take full advantage of smart digital solutions and develop a more cooperative effort where consumers will support operation of the system. And this is one of the main points, as you know, of interconnect and universal. And we think that DSO must be, we see ourselves as the key enablers for this challenge, especially on electric mobility. And for that, it's not just this point you refer, it's much more than that. For instance, we need to have a different regulation. For instance, if you put different tariffs at the end of the day, when someone arrives to the car at home, it's easy to control if the tariffs is too high. So it's not the easy solution. We need to think different solutions of smart charging. And the main word for this period is flexibility. And vehicle to grid is the solution, is part of the solution. In fact, we need to adjust our demand with the variability we have in the offer. And we did so much about it in the past. We always address our offer and our generation to the demand with a small adjustment, but it's not. And we think about renewables, the increase of renewables to the grid. We need to prepare for that feature. That's why we are now thinking about an advanced management system in our grid. We are working on it in a way to manage all the information in our grid, connect with the TESOs, and connect with the activity. We are not owner, because in the future, anyone can connect and disconnect the vehicle to grid, grid to vehicle, micro generation. So it's a different world. But speaking about the electric mobility, we need to develop new grid tools to ensure the standards, in a way we can follow it, and to empower the customers to participate. In a way, they know exactly how to use the vehicle for any moment. Thinking about vehicle to grid, we need to be careful about the standards of power quality. There's some issues that came, and I think this lab will be very useful to find the right way to reduce that impact. So flexibility is the key word, and we are trying to work on it in a very deep way. Those projects are really important about that. We know that grid to vehicle is developed, and we are now looking to the charging points. We even inside the company we are testing some smart charging solutions. The market is very active. The Commission decide that this charging activity is more market-oriented activity, but we try to follow it, especially for fast charging points, and we need to do it. When we speak about vehicle to grid, it's quite different because we are still in the infancy. We need to go deeper in these projects, and that's why it's important to be here, to be today here, because we know, following this session since the beginning, that INESC is always looking for the future. So if you are looking for vehicle to grid, it will become important in the future, maybe 10 years, if we use the same so this early vision and the first steps to go to move in the right direction are really important. Answering your question, we are working very hard on it. We're not ready. We are going ready with much more readiness every day, and I hope we can work on it. Last point, regulation is really important because we need the right incentives to make the investments, and the customers need the right incentives to take decisions align with what we are designing for the future, especially this when they define targets like those you shared with us, and I shared also some of them in the document from the Commission. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ron. Gave me the lead to the next question, which is quite obvious. We have seen in the initial part of this panel that EV integration is a topic where our team here at INESC TEC has been working for some years. Smart charging, which allows this management of the time that EV charging occurs, has proven to help to avoid some, and these were some topics that we addressed on those projects that we mentioned. This is often referred as flexibility from demand, but now we seem to be pointing out into a different direction. Assuming vehicle to grid or vehicle to X, that includes other variants as vehicle to home and vehicle to grid, etc., can be this future trend. Because it will allow us a tremendous storage capacity that is distributed along the network. Can you tell us how you see this possibility, and how can we convince people to be a part of this when they are used to just go to the fuel pump and put fuel and just go?
Yes. Okay, thank you very much, Luis, for this so timely question. Well, in fact, up to now, system operators and also academia, we have been very much concerned about charging the batteries of the electric vehicles. And for that, we already developed solutions based on the flexibility of that charging, the so-called smart charging. But we have to bear in mind that the coming years will witness a tremendous change in the portfolio of the generation of the electric power system. And this change will be guided by the massive integration of solar PV generation. And solar PV generation brings a new need to look at the way how system needs to be operated, needs to be managed. Because we will have a tremendous availability of power during a period that is between about 11 o'clock in the morning and 5 o'clock in the afternoon. So this means that we will have power to offer, and then we need to convince consumers to use that electricity that will be available at those periods of the day. And within those consumers are the electric vehicles, clearly. So the way how I see the future is that electric cars will be a battery of a system. If we sum them up all together, they will provide the battery, the storage system that the system needs to store some extra or some surplus of available power that will be offered to the grid by solar PV generation. And so this means that in the future, electric vehicles will drive from home to the places where people work, and in the places where the people work, we will see charging points. So cars, batteries will be charged using exactly that power from solar PV generation. And that power is going to be used afterwards at the beginning of the night, beginning of the evening, where sun is no longer there, but people all go to home, they will want to start consuming more and more electricity. And so that's the moment where the electric vehicles will be there, will be available, and they will be used to help system operators in managing that increase in load, not only because of the cars that are going to be connected, some of them charging, but because electricity will be more and more used in all the loads, in all activities. So the electrification of the society will lead naturally to this situation. So this means that the electric vehicle will be there to help the management of the grid. And obviously, during the evening, yes, of course, those vehicles, those batteries will be charged again. So, and in this way, we can see how electric vehicles and the batteries of the electric vehicles will help a lot managing the operation of the network. And not only the distribution grid, but also the whole system, the whole electric power system, transmission network, and helping in dealing with the tremendous amount of solar PV generation that will be available during those periods of the day. And so this means, as you said, vehicle to grid, yes, vehicle to home, of course, but also vehicle for grid. That is, the converters, the power converters of the electric vehicles, they can also be used to control voltage, because voltage will be a problem. As a matter of fact, it's already a problem, but it will be more and more a problem for system operators to deal with. And so the electric vehicles and the converters of the electric vehicles will be there to help on that. And so at the same time, we need to bear in mind that it is possible to have those batteries of the electric vehicles and together with the converters being actively participating in frequency control. And this is something that we are already, this is something that we studied in the MERGE project more than 10 years ago, about 10 years ago, and that now we are witnessing to take place in pilots in Bornholm, in Azores, in São Miguel. In São Miguel, we are presently involved in the project that is led by GALP and together with the EDA, and we are just testing these concepts there in real world. So cars with batteries that are responding to frequency variations. And so these are all this flexibility, all this activity from the converters will help a lot the system as a whole. And of course, as you said, how are we going to convince drivers and the owners of electric vehicles to participate in the provision of all those ancillary services that will help the network to operate in such challenging scenario? Well, of course, that it is necessary to show them that this is not going to harm the battery's lifetime and that they will get some remuneration for the service they will provide. And this is something that needs to be studied. And of course, as João Dores was saying, it is very important here the role of the regulator, and for that we need a smart regulation to lead us and to convince also the owners of the electric cars to participate in all this management structure that we want the electric vehicle to have a central role for the future.
Thank you very much for such a comprehensive analysis. That's what we were expecting. It's the 10 years now that we are mentioning. Nuno, Moving to a manufacturer perspective, you are one of the leaders in terms of electric vehicles charging. We see news all the time of the capacity of FASEC at this level, namely for public networks and fast charging. I saw a very interesting recent development, I think it was in France with another company, where you provided the concept of plug and charge, relying on ISO 15108 standards for communication between the EVs and the grids, so without the need of having RFIDs or any apps and so on. How do you see this implementation of these vehicle-to-grid concepts? Does it only make sense at home? Because we see now, Professor Peslops was giving some examples in offices, but we now see supermarkets and in interconnect project, we can see that Sonai Mobile Continent is actually having a pilot where you can go shopping and you have these credits where you shop a certain amount of euros and you have a certain amount of energy. So the business model is changing completely. Do you think that these parking lots and supermarkets and other companies can actually adopt this concept to reduce their energy costs? Do you think this is competitive not only for household level but also for other services?
Depends on the timing in the calendar you're talking about. If it's today, then the answer is a sharp no. If it's somewhere in the future, 5 to 10 years in the future, then probably yes. It's not the only answer, but it could be part of a high complex equation. And I think the complexity is where the little twist lies, because and it's the same actually with your lab. So let me put things together. It's a dear business for us. It's a young startup for us with almost 10 years as well since we created electric mobility, and we have an extended range of solutions, a vast portfolio from home solutions down to ultra fast charge solutions, 350 kilowatts, and not all of them plays the same role. They are controllable in different ways. And they would also be part of the ecosystem in very different ways. What I mean by this is, if you remember, we've implemented a project called FI Charge, a smart charging project, one of the first, I would say 8 years ago. So even when we were building up our initial portfolio of solutions, we already had the controller ready for smart charging. Then we had a little challenge in implementing this with the standard communication for sending a profile of set points throughout the day to a specific charger. But we didn't stop there. So we actually had solutions that integrated, and we have actually currently on the portfolio that integrate batteries in the charger, so that we can minimize the impact of a fast charging solution may have on the electric grid. So there are many ways to control the vehicle and the way it is charging. Now, if you go to the supermarket, and I hope you are an efficient man on the supermarket, because usually men are not very efficient, so they spend way too long on the supermarket. At least I do. And if that is the case, then yes, well, we can think about vehicle to grid. But possibly supermarkets may not be the first use case or the most evident use case. A most evident use case would be a condominium, industrial or domestic condominium, where actually these solutions can be implemented, aggregated and coordinated with other assets. And other assets is exactly what you have in your roof at INESC, wind and solar. It's exactly what you have also in the building in front of you, which is storage. And EVs will, in that case and within that context, provide the flexibility, be it with smart charging or injecting actually energy into the grid with vehicle to grid, and that would make things pertinent. But in my view, only within the framework of having a correct context where to integrate and where to manage the flexibility of your EV, that will make sense. Otherwise, it's going to be a few EVs which will, even clustered, will not make the impact necessary to be able to add value on this flexibility. So again, I think one of the first times that we tested the smart charging algorithm was actually at the Smart Grids Lab, where you are, with the infrastructure you have, so the FASEC EV, domestic EV charger. But that doesn't mean that the market has accepted it so well. So yes, we have three conditions to make these something that people could use. One is technology, and I just mentioned the problem is solved. Second one is the business model, and I think we very much have the conditions now to reward people for their flexible and for their energy in the specific times that are most needed. And the third one, and possibly the one that is less flexible, is regulation. And I think, as João Pessoa already mentioned, we need smartness on the regulation like we do on the charging.
That although being a moderator, I also have some opinion. I think that a big opportunity now will be in the condominiums, because as far as I've seen in the projects, with the requirements from regulations, the amount of power available for charging EVs in the garage is something tremendous. And this smart charging in condominiums is a great opportunity, because everyone will decrease the cost. Can you imagine? Can all imagine the costs of having to maintain almost a second transformer. When you think about buildings with 80 or 100 fractions, how can we manage without having this intelligence and without having this control? And I think this is probably something that will happen before than the supermarket. As you said, I think I'm quite efficient. I'm less than 1 hour, but still in less than 1 hour, what would be the contribution that I would need to have not to have the whole car charged instead of sharing my energy? I would love to continue to talk with all of you. But the fact is that we are already 13 minutes late. I don't think it's late. I think I still see too many people attending. That shows that this has been interesting. I would like to thank you all for sharing this vision, and also for all the help and for all the commitment towards this infrastructure that, as Professor Lopes mentioned, for us here at INESC TEC is really important and relevant. We do have some time for questions. I see we have, you can raise hands if you want. We are controlling the attendees. We have here one question. I can start using this one. So it will go naturally to another hot topic, that is hydrogen. So with recent strategy for hydrogen for transports, how do we analyze this strategy comparative to the electric vehicles? I would ask probably Professor Lopes if you want to answer this one.
Yes, okay, thank you very much for the question. Well, in my opinion, electric cars will be the solution for mobility inside cities within small distances. If we look at long-range distances, then we may think about having hydrogen to be used together with fuel cells in the transportation area. And this is the way how I see it. This is the way how I look at the problem. I don't, in my opinion, I think that electric cars will always be more interesting for the users, for the drivers, if you think that they can be used within a range that is not that big. But to have hydrogen to be used for electric mobility, especially for long range mobility in that case, for that we need to produce hydrogen. So we need to see how the electrolyzers will behave. And well, in our laboratory, we have a power hardware in the loop infrastructure that is capable to see the way how, for instance, electrolyzers could behave in providing flexibility to the grid. And we will be quite keen in being able to address the topic and to study this type of impacts in terms of the operation of a specific system, provided that someone brings to us a small example, a small case of a hardware of an electrolyzer, and then we are going to test it in terms of the provision of flexibility.
Thank you very much, Professor Passarovich. I have another question that I will send to Nuno. Please run it. Yes. Considering the challenges that we have identified, and actually this is interesting because it was very similar to the question I had for you in the first part. So it's quite interesting to hear your answer. What sort of competences, and I would add technologies, do you consider relevant for us to have here for the coming 10 years?
Who is that question to?
To you.
Okay. There are things that you can see there, and there are others that you cannot see. And probably the intelligence lies in the intangible assets that you have there. And I'm talking about not algorithms, I'm talking about persons. And I go back to a point that you mentioned. It's the team that creates the willingness and the happiness actually to collaborate with institutions like INESC. It's a pleasure to cooperate with you. And because we do this so easily, it's been a sustainable relationship. But let me be specific so that I don't run away from the question. The way we test, and again, I think the complexity and the coordination between multiple assets is something that you have in the lab, and you should keep on building on top of that. Because we will see in the grids a higher heterogeneity of technologies, be it batteries, be it different generation assets, and the whole coordination between loads and generation at a specific or at least a connected geographical location is very fundamental for us. So we are a company that develops not only equipment, but also solutions. And the way we would like to test solutions after we do it in our labs, which are unit tests. So we test the equipment on their performance, but we would like to obviously take this a next step further and test equipment in an integrated environment where several scenarios can be added. And then the way we are working alongside with you, I think it's very correct. We are now cooperating in developing and giving back to some platforms high intelligence. And by high intelligence means to predict loads and generation for the distribution grid of EDP, for example, to be able to, several decades ago, we started working on state estimation, which I think is going to be even more fundamental when we go lower to low voltage, and we still miss a lot of data from low voltage grids. And obviously, if we go to smart controllers like charging and discharging of batteries and also EVs, then having a evolutionary algorithm such as AI, it's something that we must work under virtualized environments, cloud systems, with ICT. You already have heterogeneous ICT network there, but probably evolving to a 5G emulation would be a nice setup, and something that we are definitely quite actively developing at FASEC.
Very much, Nuno. We now have two questions that can be collapsed actually in one. And I think it focused a little bit on some of the, when I ask how do we convince people, we have some of our participants highlighting the fact that being batteries the most susceptible price of an EV, the use of this battery to support the vehicle to grid can actually have an impact on its duration. How do we anticipate how to deal with this issue? Manufacturers also tend to give us every day some new developments on this, and technology is actually evolving. We've seen the range of batteries and the size of the different modules to change every day. Professor Pessalopoulos, do you think that this example, for instance, of limiting the number of cycles is something that could be followed? Could we have somehow, like we did in smart charging, to define thresholds for each and every person, to define in what conditions, in what, let's say, economic conditions should I support, and not just to have cycles all the time increasing and increasing the life, the duration of the battery? What do you think on this?
Well, thank you for the question. Well, first of all, I think what we need to start first is to try to understand how V2G will really affect the warranty, the lifetime of batteries. I'm not fully convinced that there will be a tremendous degradation if V2G is going to be operated under specific rules and well-defined rules. So this is the first step. Of course, that manufacturers, they may decide to limit in terms of number of cycles according to also to the warranty that they are going to provide, to give. And I understand that position also. But also extremely important, and I already mentioned that, is to find out the way how to remunerate for the services that the batteries of the electric vehicles can provide to the grid. Because in fact, V2G will be a provision of a service. It can be a service in terms of like peak shaving, for instance, helping in terms of peak shaving in a specific part of the grid, or it can be operated in terms of arbitrage in somehow. Okay, so there is always a value for this, not only in terms of the energy that is going to be delivered back to the grid, and in that case it could be seen in terms of arbitrage, but it can also be seen in terms of a service. And I do believe it is possible to find out the value of those services. And if those services are interesting enough, I'm sure that consumers, I mean, in this case, drivers, they are also consumers, but they are in fact drivers and owners of electric vehicles, they will participate. And I know about some pilots, some tests that are being developed, for instance, in Denmark. And I'm aware that a lot of drivers, they have adhered to the concept, and they are now receiving some money back because of the provision of those services. So the point here is to find the right the right way to pay to the users, to the owners of the electric cars for those services they could provide.
Thank you, Professor. I must also add that I've read a lot about this lately, and there is one thing that Renault, for instance, had when we had the first car in the beginning, that they had this model of leasing the battery and not exactly selling. What we see nowadays is that the model of ownership of vehicles is decreasing, and people start to lease cars instead of just simply buy them. They're not that good investment, as we all know. And there is also, so with the appropriate economical model, we can see how this value cannot be lost. For instance, we can imagine that something that was 5 or 6 years ago as a disposal, so the manufacturers had a problem with the batteries. What shall we do when they are not in good condition? And now we see the Johan Cruyff Arena in Amsterdam, or you see Teatro Camões in Lisbon with second life batteries coming from Nissan Leafs, or BMW in Leipzig. They also have a large demonstrator. So showing that those batteries that were not good enough to provide those cycles of the typical use of an electric vehicles can somehow be used. And thinking on circular economy, you will get, let's say, a much more, let's say, we will reduce significantly the impact, the environmental impact of these batteries. And everyone is working on this. We have also the problem with cobalt in Congo, and Tesla itself, it's reducing and working on new technology. So I would say that, as Professor Pesselop said, this issue of the technology being degraded is something that I don't see in the near future as an issue. Of course, it's not supposed to be charging and discharging and charging and discharging. It's like your cell phone. We keep our cell phone, a lot of people keep the cell phone connected all night in the charger, and we all know that lithium does not like that, but people tend to do that, although there is an incentive for us to change the mobile every year. That's what they want. So we don't have recommendation in that sense. I think now it's really time to close. I just have one moment that I would like to share with the audience that we mentioned here 2 or 3 times, all of us, that is about the people. You can see, or you will see now, an overview of some of the people that had an impact on this operation. We, as Professor Pesselop described in the beginning, and you've seen in those pictures, we had an empty room. We had to do it all without having many times the support we required to have these ambitious goals. We were capable to do so, and this was only possible to a great number of people that we are just reminding here as very important and fundamental for our success. Of course, you are always welcome here, Nuno, João, Nikos, as privileged partners for all these years. But I would say that there is a special need for us to thank all of these people that during these years help us to be in this place. So, if nothing else is to be done, I would close the session. Thank you for my guests for a very interesting discussion, and thanks to all the attendees that were, let's say, sharing or at least listening to our shared thoughts about the development of an infrastructure that became a reference in Portugal, definitely for INESC TEC, I think in Portugal, and we can be ambitious, let's say, in Europe also. So thank you very much, and bye-bye.
Thank you, Luis. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.